we'll go ahead and get started. By way of announcements, we will be, let me get it straight here. There's going to be a work day this Saturday at the campground to get ready for conference, which is next week, beginning next Wednesday, which means we will not have services next Wednesday night, but we do encourage you to come to conference. Brother George Holly will be our speaker. Baby bottles are due this Sunday, so make sure you bring your baby bottles back. And we still need, project fund offering will be Sunday as well. And we still need volunteers for the Wednesday night classes. I think that it's the announcements. Do we have any prayer requests? Need to add Roger Moak. He is having some problems, so let's keep him in our prayers. I think he's at the ER now, so. If there aren't any, then let's go to the Lord in prayer. Brother Newton, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Merciful God, we thank you for the blessings of the day, the freedom to come and worship and fellowship together. We pray a blessing upon those who have come and make their effort to worship and fellowship together. We ask you to make this church a refuge from Satan and his evil influences and a place of peace and love. Touch those that's on our prayer list, Lord, to heal those that are sick, comfort those who are bereaved, give guidance and direction to those who are seeking them. We ask these things in our most holy name.
Amen. Huh? Yeah, it's time to go to class now. All right. And Caleb, if you'll go with.
Why does everybody think it's a day off?
What do we know about Jeremiah? We got through that in a hurry, so let's move on then. When Jeremiah was called of God to be a prophet, we don't know how old Jeremiah was, but we know that he was a young man. And in Jeremiah 1:5 it says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." Can you think of any other scripture that sounds like that has something along those lines? Before I knew you in the womb, or before you were born, I knew you. Maybe something like, I put you together in your mother's womb. I knit you together in your mother's womb. That sound familiar? Well, we'll come back to that in just a moment. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you or set you apart. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. Have you ever felt like maybe like you just don't have purpose? Did she do well? Is she doing okay?
Yeah, she's doing okay,
Yeah.
but it was a skin cancer on her nose,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's worse than what she thought it was gonna be, because it is spread it over somewhere close to her eye,
Hmm.
so.
All right, so we need to add Dean to the prayer list too then. So when God called Jeremiah, he called him and he said, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. You know, sometimes we get this idea that, well, you know, it's not, it doesn't really matter. I'm not that important. I don't really have purpose. We kind of get the idea that we're an island in a big ocean. You ever felt like that? Like you were just all by yourself amongst all these people all around you, but you're just there by yourself. Well, let's go back to Psalm 139 then. Because the verse that I read from Jeremiah, I'll drop down to the verse that I was talking about, and then we'll come back and start over with 139. But it says in verse 13, "For you formed my inward parts, you covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." So, what is God, what is David there saying? Before you were born, I formed you. That's what he said to Jeremiah. And then David says, you put me together. You knit me together in my mother's womb. You made me the way I am. So when we get this idea in our minds that we're out here like an island and we're all by ourselves and you know, that's just it. That's all there is to it. It's just us. That's not true. Because just like Jeremiah, just like David, God knew each of us. He put us together. He knit us. He made us. And every one of us was born with purpose. God made us with purpose. He made us with an intent, with a plan. Just like when Jeremiah was born, he was made with God. He was born with purpose. He was set apart. God created him for that purpose. When we go back to Psalm 139, I want to go back to the beginning because the first 12 verses kind of set the stage for what David is talking about there. And I think it's important for us to consider. He starts out by saying, you have searched me and known me. Now, what is David saying there? And by the way, Psalm 139, he starts out with, you've searched me and known me. And I'm going to skip down to verses 23 and 24 for just a second, and then I'll come back. Does anybody know what verses 23 and 24 say? You do. You just don't realize it. Search me, O God, and know my heart. So how about that? So we start out with, you have searched me and known me, and then he finishes with that prayer, search me, O God. Now, so if he starts out with, you've searched me and known me, then why is he finishing with, search me, O God, and know me? Why do you think he's doing that?
See how he's done lived his life.
See how he's lived his life? Okay. Or how about this? Maybe what he's saying is, you know me, but maybe I don't know myself. Maybe there's something about me that I need to know that I'm hiding from, that I'm covering up, that I'm pretending like it's not there. Let's go back to verse 1 again. It says, you've searched me and known me. And then verse 2 says, you know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. In other words, God sees us every minute of every day, where we are, whether we're sitting down, whether we're rising up, and he also knows our thoughts. No, that's scary, isn't it? He really is a mind reader. He knows every thought that we have. So when you just thought, I wish the preacher would hurry up and get finished, he heard that. He knew that. He knew what you were thinking. You comprehend my path. Again, going back to Jeremiah here for a second. And when we are inclined to think that we're an island, that we're not important, that we don't matter, this is what David is saying here. You do matter. You are important because God knows you. Just like he told Jeremiah, before you were born, I formed you. I knew you. I set you apart before your birth to be a prophet. The same is true for each of us. God set us apart for a purpose before we were born. He had a plan. He knew what that plan was. And what David is saying is, you need to show me. I need to know. What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to say? There's not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it. He knows every word that we speak. He says, you've hedged me behind and before. In other words, do you know of anybody else, by the way, that was said about, you've hedged me behind and before? You've circled me. You've built a hedge around me. Job. Remember, that's what Satan said about Job. Oh, yeah, you got a hedge built around him. I can't get to him. I can't touch him. And David is saying the same thing here. You got a hedge around me. You've got your hand on me. Verse 6, he says, this knowledge is too wonderful. Just stop and think about that for a second. What exactly is David saying here? And think about it personally as it applies to you. That means that when we think that we're alone, when we think that we're facing whatever the situation is by ourselves, we're not. That's in our own minds. Because if we will turn to him, if we will trust in him, if we will depend on him, then we can trust him and we can know that he's going to be there to help us. David went through some tough times. He went through some very difficult periods in his life. Some of them of his own, from his own choices, consequences of his own choices. Some of them not so much. But there were times that David would have felt like he was all alone. And I think Psalm 139 is something of a reminiscing, looking back at what God has done, because he says things like, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you're there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. What does that mean? God is always with us. Why does he say that your hand shall lead me and your right hand shall hold me? I know you lefties aren't going to like this, but in Scripture, especially in Hebrew, when it refers to the right hand, it's referring to power, the hand of power. Because the most common, especially in that day, the most common was that a person was right-handed. And so the right hand signified power. And so whenever it uses right hand, it is referring to a hand of power. Isaiah uses the same thing, uses the same concept as well. And so the hand leading and then the right hand holding us means that God's powerful hand is going to hold us up. How powerful is God? All powerful. What does that mean? What does it mean? I mean, stop and let's talk this through for a second. What does it mean when we say God is all powerful? Is there anything that is there anything that you can't do? Huh? A lot of things we can't do. We're limited. We have power. I mean, we refer to the right hand, and we can pick things up, and I can even pick something up that's a little bit heavier than that, if I'm lucky. There are things that we can do. There are a lot of things that we can do, and there are a lot of things that we have the ability to do, but we have limitations. There are some things that we cannot do. One thing that we cannot do, for example, we cannot make something out of nothing. There's no human being in existence or has ever been in existence, with one exception, or who will ever be in existence, that can make something out of nothing. You're laughing. Who is the exception? Well, yeah, sometimes they do that, don't they? But when we think about creation, for example, God created everything that we see. And how did he do it? He spoke it into existence. He said, let there be light, and there was light. Let there be water, there was water. Let there be the firmament, there was the firmament. Let the earth appear, there's the earth. Let this happen, let that happen. Let the trees grow up, let the plants grow up. I want a lion, I want a bear, I want a this, I want a that. He spoke everything, and it all came into existence with one exception, and that was man. Brings us back to where we are now. Because this is what David is saying. Man is not an accident. We didn't evolve from something or nothing. I read an interesting article this week, or last week it was. I don't remember the guy's name now, but he's one of these philosopher, scientists, something or another, I'm not sure. But he was arguing for intelligent design in creation. And what he said is, if you take everything all the way back, and you go all the way back to the very beginning, there had to be the beginning of something. In order for everything to be where it is now, even assuming that it all just happened, and you take it all the way back to that very first microbe, or whatever you want to call it, where did it come from? How did it get started? Now, he's not arguing for evolution, by the way. In fact, he's contradicting evolution when he says this, because what he's saying is that even if that were the case and everything did just happen and just kind of come together like it did, there still has to have been some intelligent design in that. And the other thing that he uses in his argument is DNA. What do we know about DNA now?
Everybody's got DNA.
Or more precisely, what does DNA say about us?
Identifies each person.
Oh, it does more than identify you. It is, I mean, with DNA, they can look at that and they can go back and they can tell you who your ancestors are. They can tell you all the different types of blood that you have, what your bloodline is. If there's any Indian there, whether you came from Germany or England, and all of these things, all of that can be identified through your DNA. Now, does that sound like something that just happened? I mean, that's really far-fetched, isn't it? For DNA to be so intelligent and to have that intelligence, anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. So David is saying, God made us. And so when God created us, when he made us with purpose. Just like he said to Jeremiah, you had a purpose before you were born. When I was putting you together in your mother's womb, when I was knitting you together, and that's what David says here on down. Let me get on down there. He said that in verse 15, my frame was not hidden, I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they all were written. The days fashioned for me were as yet there were none of them. When as yet there were none of them. So even before you were born, God knew all of your days. So that brings up a question then. If God sees all of your days and knows everything that you're going to do, what does that mean? How do we know then how is it? How can it be my fault then if I don't get saved, for example? Free will. But God knows everything already. He knows what's going to happen. Okay. The choice is still there.
If you intercedes, it's not that will.
Then that would be kind of like predestination.
See, this is where predestination gets off track, I think. There is an element of predestination that is true. But the predestination is not from the point of view of you don't have a choice in the matter. God lays it out. Let me use an example here. You take your child to the store, and you happen to know that they love chocolate ice cream. And so you go to the store, and they have all of these ice cream flavors there. Now, you know which one they're going to choose, right? They're going to choose chocolate because they love chocolate. Every time you take them there, they choose chocolate. But you walk in, and you show them all of the different flavors there, and you say to them, which one do you want today? And they say, I think I'll have chocolate. Now, you knew what they were going to choose. You knew that they were going to choose chocolate because that's what they always choose, because that's what they love. And so you could have just gone in and said, give me a chocolate ice cream cone for him because that's what he's going to want. But you didn't. You gave him the opportunity to make that choice. Because just maybe, this would have been the day that they'd have said, I think I'll try something different today. That's the picture of a sovereign God who knows everything that you're going to do. The difference is, when you ask your child, which one do you want, you're assuming that they're going to choose chocolate because that's what they've always chosen. God, on the other hand, knows what you're going to choose because he sees already the choice that you've made before you even made it. But he still gives you that opportunity to make that choice. He doesn't choose for you. And that's where predestination fails, because predestination assumes that God has predestined you for this and that you have to do this, when that's not the case. He gives you the choice.
It won't have happened if Judas had made another choice.
Then there would have been somebody else.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. God would have, okay, let's come back to that now. A sovereign God sees all things. He knows the choices that are going to be made, so he can put things in place because he knows that those choices are going to be made, and that's what's going to happen. So he directs things accordingly.
But Jesus actually wanted to get out of the plan. You know, in the garden, he says that this cup can pass from him,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So he was exercising free choice there.
As the human side of him was realizing, or what actually was experiencing already, the torment that he would be going through, because remember it says that even in the garden Jesus was sweating drops of blood, and medical science tells us that that happens when a person is under severe emotional stress, that the capillaries in the skin will actually rupture, causing you to sweat blood. It's a real thing. And so,
With a guy in Jackson that did that.
Mhm.
He gets so stressed out, his face would break out, droplets of blood.
yeah. And that's what happened with Jesus. It was the emotional stress, and that's why he cried out, God, if there's any way possible, let this cup pass from me. But where did he come back? What did he come back to? Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. When we look at things that happen, and that's where, again, it's, we sometimes wonder, okay, well, let's go back to the very beginning then. When God created Adam and Eve and placed them in the garden, they had a choice. But God knew what they were going to choose. That's why, if you go to what Paul wrote later, looking back to before creation, when God had the meeting in heaven before creation, before man was ever created, he knew that man was going to sin. And Jesus volunteered to be the sacrificial lamb even before man sinned. So, again, a sovereign God. Boy, did we get off track with all-powerful. Man. Anyway, a sovereign God who has all power. He knows all these things, and he knows everything there is to know about us. And, in fact, that's what David is saying. He says, I think about how precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. And he goes on to give a sum. More than the numbers of the sand. Let's see, how does he put it? More than the number more in number than the sand. You ever tried counting sand? I mean, just pick up a handful of sand and try to count the individual granules or grains of sand. I mean, yeah. And yet, David said, your thoughts are more in number than the sand. Not the sand in a hand, but the sand. And we think about how much God cares about us then, how much God knows about us, and what God is doing for us. That's when David comes down to that statement at the end of the psalm then, search me, O God, and know my heart. And what David is saying there, when you look at everything else that he's talked about in this psalm, what he's saying, God, you know me better than I know myself. And so what I'm asking you to do is to show me myself. And show me if there's anything that is not in line with your will, that's not according to your purpose. He says, and see if there is any wicked way in me. What David is saying there is, search me, O God, and show me. He's already said at the beginning that you know me, that you know everything there is to know about me. But now he's praying and asking God to show me. Show me what I'm like. Show me what's there. Show me if there's anything there that I need to take care of. If there's anything there that I need to correct, anything that I need to fix. And when we do that, then God, who is faithful, will do so. And he ends then with, lead me in the way everlasting. Again, going back to that statement earlier where he says, God leads me with his hand, and he holds me with the right hand. So he leads us, he shows us the way, and he holds us up, he supports us, he carries us through as long as we're walking in accordance with his will and living according to his plan. Aren't you thankful that you're fearfully and wonderfully made and that God has a purpose for you? You're not an accident. You're not a mistake. You didn't just happen. God created you for purpose. Go to him and ask him what that purpose is and fulfill that purpose and be what God would have you to be. Any comments, any questions? If not, then let's stand and Bobby, would you dismiss us in prayer, please?